A person who thinks all the time has nothing to think about except thoughts. So, he loses touch with reality and lives in a world of illusions. By thoughts, I mean specifically chatter in the skull, perpetual and compulsive repetition of words, of reckoning and calculating. I'm not saying that thinking is bad. Like everything else, is useful in moderation. A good servant, but a bad master. And all so-called civilized peoples have increasingly become crazy and self-destructive because through excessive thinking they have lost touch with reality. That's to say, we confuse science with the real world.
I like to tell myself that the universe gives us exactly what we can handle and maybe a little bit more. So just being in the flow of like, this is what's happening. But
I agree with that.
You agree with that sentiment?
Well, yeah, it certainly does, right? We can't grow if our problems are smaller or equal to us.
We can't.
What the hell happened to you this week?
And are you asking because that's a vibe you got from me? Or are you just wondering?
I think this is a good episode for me to listen.
And okay, rather than...
You know, I don't want to get into it, but I got taken out by a random sickness. And I don't necessarily have the most energy, and I'm happy to contribute, as always. But it seems like a really good time for me to listen. And we don't have to necessarily get anywhere, but maybe just if we want to put some things out that have been going on, we can, I'm just here to listen.
Yeah, I like that. So yeah, it's been like, I feel like 2 weeks ago was things that I needed to do in my life that were to bring some sort of closure, to bring some sort of clearing out of things. And then, so I would say this past week was a little bit more reflection and recovery time, if that makes sense. So it's like making these life decisions and changes. And then this past week was, sort of finding ways to work through knowing the decisions I made, 100%, not looking back, with conviction. I knew exactly what I needed for myself and what I was doing, and I knew that that was the right path for me. Don't know where it's going, but that's okay. That's leaning into the faith and surrendering. And as we just said, like the universe was like testing me and just saying, is this really what you want, actually? Is this what you want for yourself? And that's where I put myself in my mind and my heart. I'm like, the universe is giving me these opportunities to test me, to dig in, to like really learn about what I want and who I am. And, if you're like clearing space, for instance, like people. Like I want to tell you what I did on Tuesday. It was kind of fun. Unless you want to comment on that first.
I won't pry, but the one thing I'll ask you about is, you mentioned you were clearing out, making space, sounding like it might be humans. And the process there was, you said it was kind of twofold. So at first it was separating the self from the person, and then the second part of that you said was a reflection stage, right? So it was like the actual act, and then this was reflecting. Another insight I have is that it was an emotional week for you. And it seems like there's a little bit of continuous uncertainty, because you said before going into the decision you made to clear out, you did it with certainty, and then this week after making the decision, you still felt an element of the universe was testing you if it was something you really wanted. And I'm curious why that is.
Why I felt the tests? That I had these tests? Once you made the decision, like, why were the tests still coming?
What did the tests look like? What were those moments?
The tests look like, so yes, they were, part of the cleansing for me was removing humans, making space, however you want to say that. There was a few things going on that week, but then that was some of the more prominent things. What that looks like is when you do clear out space and you make the decision of saying, I'm moving forward from this, I wish you well, see what the future unfolds for if there might be a reconnection. So I think sometimes a test would be a reminder of that person, even though you shut the door or whatever, moved on, closure at that moment, there's a moment of that person, I don't know, maybe reaches out again or comes into your mind, or they're your reminders of it, and then so what I ask myself is, are you missing that person, or is it, what am I missing in myself that I'm missing that person? Mm-hmm. Knowing that these friendships and relationships had to come to the closure. So this is such an opportunity for me to go in and like, okay, what am I missing, that person, or am I missing what that person was offering me in that friendship? The reflections are very much knowing that whatever this person or people were doing and not showing up for you, it's knowing and believing in yourself and thinking, I'm not too much, I'm not asking for too much, this is what I want from a friend, and this is what I believe a friendship is. So if they're not showing up, you can't convince them otherwise. Mm-hmm. Why am I putting energy in convincing somebody that this friendship would be amazing if you show up for me? I have no time for that. Mm-hmm. I have no space for that. And I know this. Like, I'm not. This is definitely something, a reflection, a revelation that I've come about and know about. So I think in some ways, like, going through the process of that, the universe testing me and niggling me and nudging me, saying, okay, you miss this person. However, remember why you decided to close that chapter.
Mm-hmm. I realize sometimes we go into these kind of esoteric teachings, like Hermeticism, right? Yeah. And we talk about nature, and we talk about the stars, and we talk about astrology and all these things. Mm-hmm. But it's like, why? Mm-hmm. And what it does is to prove, first and foremost, that there's a pattern that is undeniable, so that you're able to buy into a system and recognize the trajectory it can put somebody on, and the majesty and beauty of that. But on a practical level, they teach us things that can help us understand who we are in the context of where we are and how we think and what we do and what we feel. And that was all preface to say that there are a couple concepts that we think about where they might sound like these, hard to grasp things you need to study and remember, but when you analyze them so much, it's actually, everything that's true is very simple. It's very simple. And when we talk about as above, so below, for example, right? Mm-hmm. There's a correspondence of the behavior we do in our outer world with our relationships, or in our relationship to the outer world in general, and what we do inside of our head, right? Inside of our mind. And we have to not confuse the two, the acts of the two.
Do you, I know we talk about so above, do you want to elaborate a little bit more on that? To give some further context.
Yeah, so with as above, so below, The sentiment is saying that there's a microcosm and a macrocosm. The macrocosm is this universe you wake up to, and the microcosm is what's going on inside of your head and in your body, right? There's a correspondence between the two, and sometimes we get confused by the outer activity versus what the inner activity is, right? Yeah. And we have to make sure that if we're doing something like removing people from our outer world, we have to realize that what happens before that is what happens in our inner world. So what happens in our mind actually precedes what happens in our outer world, because you have to make the decision in your mind before you go out and do the act, for example, right? And so concurrently, we can't look to the outer world in our actions to create a sense of balance within us, right? So we can't try and make sense of our worlds and how we feel using the outer world. And so the act of cleaning shop and separating yourself from other people, what we talk about with transmutation, which is such a, and I currently recognize how pretentious that is, but it's a word that's important because it points you in the direction of the literature that'll help you understand the concept. But simply what that says is, even the zodiac, what they are just simply archetypes that everybody has. Not that we are one or the other. It's that these are the things that everybody has, the good and the bad of these specific traits. And we get to look inside of ourselves, right? And figure out which of those things are coming to the surface that we need to flip to their shadow sign, to the other sign, right? Because there's always a polarity in everything. And so what we do is we figure out the things that aren't good and the things that aren't true inside of us, and we shift them into their proper place, into the place of good and true, right? And so when we do that within ourselves, that's when we realize that certain things in our outer world have not caught up with the transformations we've made internally. That's right. And that's when we separate ourselves from others. But we can't look to the outer world to try and give us information about what's changing inside of us. There are two selves, right? There is this animalistic, this body self that is driven towards the senses, towards feeling, right? Towards these animalistic desires and wants. And then there's the other one. It's this higher self that is this guide. Allow that one to be the leader. And when it is, you'll realize when the former is talking. When the former is saying, no, go back, you won't be safe, it won't be okay. Your evolution is because it's fighting for its survival. Yeah. But you've already made the agreement that you are going to continue to grow. And so you can't let that one take over.
That's right. I love that. That gives definitely, I mean, for me, that gives further context, but anyone listening, that makes perfect sense. It's, well, we come back to the word, like going inward, and then the whole intuition, your will, that's the faculties again. It's like the reasoning, your perspection, your perceptive. It's almost like, I guess what you could even say, the logic versus the actual. The logic is your, I don't know, I guess your conscious level of this animalistic person that's in the survival mode, when your higher self has already, as you said, made the decision, and it's that trust as well, trusting the intuition, trusting what that voice is telling you. Well, actually, your voice is not telling you. Actually, that's just what it is. And the more we practice that, and you believe in yourself, and you trust, even though you don't really, it's so unknown. It just feels right. There's still pain involved. There's still sadness, or not that it's confusing. It's just like, it's so powerful when you're tapped in, when you're connected to that. The connection is so real and so authentic. And again, I would say, if anyone asks me and I talk about it with people, it's a practice. You just have to keep doing it, trying it, until it actually just becomes the way of life. Which is what I believe it to be.
And these faculties, right? These are things that all humans have, right? And undeniably, no matter how strong or weak they are, we know we have them. right?
Yeah.
And if we look at any other animal around us, right, we're looking into nature, or we're looking at any life in general, right, minerals, plants, whatever it is. It's so obvious that we were given these faculties in order to nurture them, right? Because we are uniquely the possessors of these gifts.
Yeah.
And we have to revere them and to respect them, because they actually are our number one powers, right? And as we develop our own personal virtue, and then later our relationship to the outer world, things become more clear, because you've opened yourself up to be able to actually receive from these faculties that exist within every single one of
That's
us. And as a beautiful reference, and because I know there's another thing you wanted to say there, and I'm not going to forget that, but Pythagoras has these golden verses, and what that school of thought teaches is that concurrently, while you're learning philosophies and intellectual wisdom, you need to be developing your virtue, because one makes way for the other. They're not interchangeable, but they are two processes that can't exist without the other. And think about how beautiful that is, right? You can't attain any type of mystical, divine power and understanding without developing the virtue in order to get there. And that the truth in that just goes to show how there is an order that exists outside of what our ideas of the world are, right? The truth continues no matter if we want to agree with it or not, right? And so I notice that a lot of people around me are developing their virtue, but it's like, just consciously understand that that's what it's doing, and don't be hard on yourself.
The more you do, if you do beat yourself up, then you're playing the role of, not necessarily doing this on purpose, but like the role of like putting yourself in this victim mindset, and some people do it because they don't know any better at the moment. They do it perhaps because they want attention in that way. There's various reasons why people choose that. And just to go back to the faculties, no, I wrote them down there. It's memory, perception, will, imagination, which is super important, reason, and intuition. And these are, I'm just learning about these as an adult though. And so one of my missions working with kids is teaching them these faculties. That's powerful in a kid, where it'll just become natural. It's already there for them, especially when you're a child. And the imagination, off the charts for kids right now. The creativity is so beautiful. That's what we want to tap into with kids, allowing them to be creative and have this imagination, and never telling them otherwise. Allowing, just have to let it go, and be who they are. This will give them, this is the power for them. I'm so thankful it's come across my mind, my body, and I think I've already had these within me, but you can lose sight of them. And if we tap into them, if we're, and like at the very top I wrote, we are human. We're all human, and we will go through these phases of tapping into these, forgetting about them, not being aware of them, whatever it is. But the awareness is there, and now to teach this to other people is pretty powerful. And teaching it in a way that's guiding them and reminding them, and it's just bringing awareness to these things. And like the word will, for instance, it's, I said to somebody this morning, remove the word can't or should. It's either you will or you won't. Like, make it your will to do what's best for you, show up for yourself. The will is there, and it's, if you connect all of these, that's harmony in the body, that's balance for you. And then if something's out of balance, as you said, don't be so hard on yourself. Go back to your faculties. Think about what's out of sync, what's out of what's out of harmony. Not comparing yourself to the external world, not comparing yourself to other people. It's just whatever's going on with yourself. The more you're centered with who you are and that core person, which is ever changing and evolving, as you said. But that's the beauty in it. Just it's pretty powerful when, with conviction, you have these conversations with people, and people either get it or they don't get it, they're on board or whatever it is. But just the more you talk it through and talk about it and believe in it, people will come around. Because as we both say, it's within all of us to tap into these things, to go inward, to work out who you are. And I love that. Actually, you were a good reminder for me when you said everyone has this within them, rather than saying maybe they'll get there, maybe they won't. They will get there.
Mm-hmm. Well, everyone has to, right? It's no one in the world can come save you but yourself. Mm-hmm. But that's scary at first, mm-hmm. but then it becomes incredibly empowering, because you realize that you realize what the work is to do, right? You develop a sense of direction. You're like, okay, if no one's going to be able to do the internal work for me, you begin to recognize all the shit that's been going on, that you've been kind of put on the back burner for somebody else to come scoop away for you, right? And you say, okay, this is my inventory. This is the storage unit I forgot about in the middle of Austin, Texas somewhere. Right? These are all the things that I need to clear out. Yeah. And once you do that, these qualities, these archetypes that we talk about, the good and the bad, we realize these are our direct assignments to overcome.
Yes. And
you realize that through your sense of reason, you've gotten a sense of direction, right? And then through this thing that seemed like a burden, you've actually gotten purpose, right? And since everybody has this this journey to take on for themselves, you realize that it's not your job to go and fix the world. It's to exemplify something that can inspire, kindle a spark, right? Like a phoenix in the ashes for those who you come into contact with.
Absolutely.
But what was the other thing that you wanted to bring up?
Yeah,
in the
this
beginning?
is kind of fun. So there's this person, a newer friend. Her name is Jenny. She is Venezuelan and lives in Scotland. And so, why are you smiling?
There's some dynamic friend groups.
I know,
emerging for you.
I love it. It's so cool. And I mean, I can share how I know her. And so, she's certified in hypnotherapy, and mainly for whatever, but for healing. And I know she's been working with some people in Scotland and around the world. She used to live here in Maryland, not far from here. When I told her where I live, she's like, I literally just moved away from there 4 or 5 months ago. I mean, it's so serendipitous. So she was like my neighbor, essentially. Anyway, she's a cool bird. So I did a hypnotherapy session on Tuesday with her. It was a really heavy emotional day. Again, not complaining, it's just what it was. And it was like, I was feeling it, I was sitting with it. And I had this session with her. It was perfect timing. And so we talked it through, and she said, it sounds to me like you might need, depending on whether or not anyone believes in this, I tried it. She said, it sounds like you need to cut cords with some people in your life. That might help you begin to heal. And she's like, how do you feel about that? And I was like, let's go for it. I mean, I'm willing to try just about anything, right? So she takes you through this process and this visual that she's just like, if you want to lay down, you want to sit up, like whatever is comfortable for you. I had my earbuds in, I just listened. She's like, I'm here. I'm just going to talk for the next 30 minutes and go through the process with me. At any point, if you feel unsafe or scared or upset or whatever, just say your name. So she was like it was literally like a really cool process set up that I felt completely comfortable. And she takes you on this journey. It was very specific of being in nature, And I mean, I could always go into the details with you another time, but you are like, they want you, the way she's done it is like you descend. So I was walking downstairs, you know, to a path, and then that path led me to an opening of like this area of purple flowers, like she specifically said purple, and then she led me to a stream, a very rapid moving fast stream. But before we started, I had these like gold like orbs around me that could have been whatever they want, your angels, your people. For me, they were literally like gold melted all over my body to protect me through this process. And so she's like, if you want to, when you're ready, this is the people, the person, whatever it is you want to separate from, is across the river. So so you talk about the cord, like if you want to cut it. I didn't cut it. And the cords for me were like actually my solar plexus, because she asked me later once I came out of it. And for me, it was more of a deep meditation rather than a hypnotherapy session, but it was a very deep meditation. And she said, well, describe to me if you feel safe. And so I said, actually, there was like these cords were like sucked into my stomach and like attached. And she said, oh, okay, where in your stomach? And I said, here, whatever, like in my stomach here. And she's like, those are your solar plexus. That's where you have your self-confidence, your self-esteem. Personal power, yeah. So sometimes it's in your hands, sometimes it's in your heart, your head, like wherever they are, feet. And once I remove them, then she's like, allow the gold to like soak into those holes to fill them again for you with love and compassion, understanding. And so I did this visual with her that literally separated me from these people that I was like, I want to separate myself from them. And they too have to, in the visual, they have to separate as well. I mean, they can't, because it's your own visual and your own meditation, it's like they can't say no necessarily, but it's almost like they're releasing because that's what you want. Mm-hmm. So they're, in a sense, supporting the separation. And I found it to be really powerful. And it's like, I do think about that if I feel a little bit of a ping, but it's for me, that kind of visual, that kind of meditation really helped me. From the other day and just journaling about it. And she said, it's not, if it's whatever you want to separate yourself from, it doesn't mean it's forever. It doesn't mean you'll never talk to them again. It doesn't mean whatever it means it is. But it's like a magnetic energy that in order for me, myself, to move forward, this is something I wanted to try and do for myself. Because there is an energetic connection, even though, not like the person, whether they're near or far, it's just really that release. And allowing that cord to dissolve into the water, and then in my vision, they dissolved as well. Into like, in a positive way, like the ether, like it's like surrendering, and it's like freedom. And then I like washed away all the things then the water calmed, and then I was able to like step into the water and not be dragged out, but actually be strong in placement, still like having this like gold that surrounds me. And it was really cool experience.
Did she walk you through the visualization component, or did that emerge for you naturally?
She was pretty specific about the visual. Like the cord was where the cord was for me. So then she asked me afterwards where that cord was attached, and then how that felt for me when I took the cord out. Like I had tears running down my face. She could hear me, but it was like such a release as well. But she was very specific about the stairs, the nature, the flowers, in the pasture, the actual stream itself. But she used gold, and I imagine myself like what I was wearing. She let me do that. I would have chosen probably like a beach, because that's like my safe space. But I like that she took me on a journey through nature, through the woods, because that's like trees are so healing. She was very specific, but then I was able to still visualize the cord, where the cord was. I don't think she used the word dissolve. I think I said I used the word dissolve. For me, it could be however that when you do that separation, whatever that looks like for you. For me, it was like somebody dissolved away.
Did you do any deep unraveling into the potential meaning about why there was a cord attached specifically to your solar plexus?
Not specifically. She just said because the process itself was like this cord cutting, because we're attached magnetically and energetically by, if you wanted to say like a cord, something that's it's like this. If I visualize it, it is like a cord that's connecting me to these people, and so I guess it's still that deep soul connection with these people in particular. But yeah, no. Do you have a response? Do you have?
I'll offer some potential symbolism.
Yeah, please. Thank you for letting me share that.
Well, I think it's a great story. I have a lot of things that I could say there. Did you do this practice with her after the Undulus week you had, or did you do it at the beginning?
I was probably it was like reinforcing the healing for me, so it came after. Like I'd cut the ties anyway in my mind, and I'd written a reflections on the people that I needed to. So in a sense, it was like part of the journey for me to heal.
So was it ultimately helpful?
Yeah, I think it was actually. And I think at any point I could have used. I feel like that could have been at any point in the journey to do that with her. It just happened to be, for me, that timing was actually was good.
Okay, so I'm gonna start with some symbolism, and then I'll touch on visualization, and maybe some other suggestions that have worked for me.
Yeah, I love it.
Within the symbolism, your solar plexus, it's yellow chakra, right?
Yes.
It's an energy center. It's personal power. But the thing about it is personal power. It is absolute sovereignty and balance. It is actually the center of your body, right? Of your physical body. It's personal for a reason. It should not be attached, right? And the beauty of this, right? If you were to look at the metaphors that are underlying or embedded within this visualization that you've walked through, the thing that spoke to you is something that said that you were attached in one area, and what the severance will do returns to you what was attached, right? So you were assigning your personal power, your value, your prana, your life force onto a relationship, and that should not have been the case.
Absolutely.
And so it's not just like it's not an umbilical cord.
Right.
It's not. It's very different. And I say that very specifically for a very precise reason, right? It's not an umbilical cord. What it is it's you. It's a part of your belonging where you've attached that part of your identity outward and depended on it.
100%.
And so the imagery makes sure that you're closing the gap where it's not a deletion of this part of you. What it actually is the it's an allowance, right? You're allowing yourself to finally find that from within, and not from that relationship. And that'll make the severance so much easier, right? And if we can come to terms with that before we go and do the act, the as above, so below, that process becomes so much more tranquil. Because you realize that, this goes back to the other thing, like that other person is probably completely ignorant to the alchemy that's going on within inside of the person that they're impacting, right? Yeah. And it's not fair for us to bring the triumph through the transformation to them. It's our journey, right? You have to let them do theirs.
Absolutely.
So just to give you some form of like actual meaning to the imagery there. I mean, it seems quite clear to me, but I'm sure there's other ways you can interpret it better than I could because it was you. Now, as it relates to visualization, in parallel to that circle you take, right? You don't want to visualize and not close the loop, right? So when you do a visualization, in a former example, I told you about a buddy who when I was questioning if I have adversaries, I not only envisioned his past that made him who he is, but I also envisioned what a potential future could look like for him. And that gave me peace, right? It's like, what could a good place look like for him? What could his evolution look like in order for him to get to a place where he's happy and not causing, whatever, destruction. So for, in this case, like when you're doing a practice like that, I'll give you a funny example.
Let's do it.
When I was a kid, I was a skate kid.
Yeah.
I was a heavy set skate kid, the best kind. I wore a helmet and
baggy clothes,
had my t-shirt companies, my like graphic tees that I was making called Good Skateboarding. And then there's a company called Girl Skateboarding. Mine, I was a man bathroom symbol instead of the girl bathroom symbol, and it had a crown on it that said "I'm no girl." I was very creative branding at the time. But the crown became like the big sentiment. Okay. And anyways, I can digress on this part of my life forever.
I have seen a photo of you actually.
Later on I got good, right? I got good, but
at skating.
But when I first started skating, I couldn't do a kickflip for the life of me. And so this is sad, but like for the first 2 years I couldn't do a kickflip. So I was just dedicated to being on a skateboard, but I couldn't do a kickflip. And then all my friends, none of us could do kickflips. So we'd go to the skate park and everyone could do kickflips, and it was super easy. And then one day, my buddy, he was a neighbor across the street, came over. And he was like, he just could do it. He was able to do it. And I was like, how'd you figure it out? Like, how did you figure it out? And we both had basketball hoops. So he lowered my basketball hoop, and I grabbed onto the rim, and then I held myself up during the flip part in order to be able to land on the board. Okay. Right? So I kind of like had my hands on the rim the whole time, and then like levitated in the air by pulling myself up, right, and then landing onto the board afterwards. And what that did was a demystification of what the process actually looks like in order to not only flip the board, but land on it, right? And what that goes to show is that I was able to visualize the process of not only what it takes to flip the board, but actually to land on it as well. And from there, like, we had an exponential growth in our performance. Like, we could learn everything because we got out of our own heads, because we didn't close the loop in our head of what it would actually look like to succeed. We were just like, nope, this is a process and there's just a wall of learning. But instead, we had to visualize what it looked like to actually make the full loop and land on 2 feet. And so I think with like everything, right, with everything we do, we can recognize that this is our barrier, this is our trick that we need to learn. Yeah. But ultimately we have to like understand what it would look like to land, because that gives us so much more clarity when we're out of our meditation and we're going and doing the thing. Does that make sense?
No, it does.
And so just to relate that to your circumstance here, right? Not necessarily the circumstance, but the practice you did with this other person who might be the best coach ever. I'm not trying to say anything, she's
new at it, so it's still a learner.
Just what's worked for me is, whether it's the friend who I wanted to help him see his full circle, or the skateboard make a full circle. Yeah. The questions end when we have an image of how that full circle will come together, right? And we can detach from the mystery of it, right? I don't want to walk around for the rest of my life saying, I hope there's a world where he can be happy and be good. I can say, no, I've envisioned a world where that can be the case, and now I know that this is a world where that's the case. I know this is a world where I can land a kickflip. I know this is a world where this person can be happy. I know this is a world where I can detach and regain my personal power, and what that'll look like, right? So you can see past this point that you're at in the outer world, where it might physically and sensorily, not a word, feel as if it's a challenge, but you already know the reality exists where that's done.
So part of the closing the loop for me was that actually. So now I see this significance in the question that you asked me. So before the meditation session with her, yes, the messages the reflections and messages that I had written and sent were the sentiment for me was that I really do like to leave, not leave, but have that, the impression of increase in all people as much as I can, as much as you're able to. So the sentiment of the messages and the reflections that I wrote, not only for myself but for these people in particular, was exactly this. The wishing them well and be well. And to your point of this is your journey, you have to do it the way you want, what makes sense for you, and I do hope for you. The hope is there for you to heal, for you to make whatever it is. Like just wishing them well, and like this is your journey, but I'm not part of that journey anymore, any longer. So it is actually for 100% removing myself from that, and because there is that attachment, which was not a healthy attachment, or whatever that attachment is, but there was this attachment to. However those people are making you feel in the relationship you have with them and for yourself. So knowing that is not the way I want to feel and didn't want to feel, but I still didn't want to be like, leaving in this situation or walking away from the situation or whatever it is, but saying your journey is your journey. This is for you, your choice of taking the journey or not. That's within your control, but also saying I'm not part of that anymore.
A tool that can help with ever dwelling, right? This is why we talk about patterns again, right? It's not to be abstract and artistic, even though sometimes I might do that. That's purely my ego. But the reason we do that is because we can see that a true cause never has an untrue effect. Right? A true cause never has an untrue effect. So you don't have to, if it's coming from your inner truth, that your intuition is telling you, and your wisdom from the fact that in nature, a true cause never has an untrue effect, then in harmony, you've realized that if what you are doing as an action in the outer world is something that's true, and it comes from love, then nothing bad can happen and you can move on.
That's right. Absolutely. Comes from love, yeah.
But you have to move on.
You have to move on. I already have.
Yeah. But this will also, it'll drive new insight for you because it'll show you which voices are talking. Yeah. And you have to remember who's the captain.
That's right.
Figure out those greater parts of you. The parts of yourself that you revere most, and let them take control. And when you hear ones that aren't that one talking and creating conflict, you get to recognize that and say, oh wait, you're just a passenger. Yeah. We love you, but I'm going to take over and I'm going to make sure we get home, get to where we need to go.
And that's such a great little visual. And again, like that's something I've used with kids as well, is choosing to be the captain of your mind, of your body, of your ship, of your plane, whatever it is you want to be a captain of. Or do you want the passengers to influence you? And I guess if you have those passengers, you still have to embrace and accept them because they're still your passengers. And the more because they're still part of you. And I guess it's like, in a sense, it's that embracing that whatever I like to call them, your darkness, your shadows, they're still there. Thank them. I accept you and embrace you, and now I need to embody. But you remain in control of those thoughts, of the power of who you are. And if we are taking, say, advice, or we're allowing someone's perspective to influence us, when in a sense they're not the people we want to be around or take advice from, but yet we're allowing whatever they've said, their perspective, their opinion, to affect us, then I guess that's a whole nother tangent that we can go down that road if we want to, but that just came for me right now. It's like, wait, this person who you may or may not, say we don't want to emulate them, it's not how we want to participate in the world, that's fine. There's a journey, there's no judgment on that. There's just like, that's not who I want to spend time around. That's not the person I want to put energy into. However, they'll share their opinion, and we allow that to affect us. And well, like, this person said this about me, and I was like, well, you don't want to emulate that person, but you're allowing their perspective of you, their opinion of you, to affect you. Again, going inward and figuring out what it is. That's your insecurities talking to you in a good way. That's a learnable thing. What is it why do you feel insecure when this person says this to you? Why does their opinion actually affect who you are and your being? Why are you allowing that to happen? Mm-hmm. I guess that's somewhat relatable to what we were talking about. Somehow I just went off on that, from that perspective.
Well, I can play off that. I mean, I think personally, emulation is treacherous of a word, because over admiration, over aspiration, over infatuation, right? These cause imbalances in ourselves where there's a vulnerability where we can fall subject into forgetting that the majesty of who we are, and wanting to figure out what that is. Emerson says, imitation is suicide. Imitation is suicide. And I think that is very accurate, because you are in a divine, individuated self that nobody can copy. And wouldn't you rather let that thing inside of you grow rather than emulate something else? So instead of emulation, it's sometimes other people can be the exemplification of things that are true. And you can revere that, and you can want to be exposed to that, because as you do that for yourself, that's what your heaven on earth will look like. You're surrounded by people that are true. But the most interesting person is not the person who has the most facts. It's not the person who runs the fastest mile time in middle school the kids are talking to, right? It is truly the one who is who they are. And that levels the playing field for everybody, because then you just want to meet the truth everywhere, right? And you're continuously embraced by that, right? And there's never any burden of teaching other people that, right? And that's why I love our theme. I've actually come to really love our theme, because there are so many places that teach people how to be this or that. But it's pretty rare to hear people say, like, no, you have it, right? You really have it. And what you do is, like, you figure out how to remove yourself from that which you are not. And once you do that, you're blank slate, you're tabula rasa, and you're out in the world, and you get to nurture this thing, this presence, and really develop a relationship with it. And that is a journey that everyone gets to go through, and everyone's going to be at different levels in the journey. So once like you have that groundwork, you realize that you might be further along in your path than somebody else is on your path as well. And they might have a level of resistance towards accepting or acknowledging anything that you might offer them. But again, all we can do is exemplify in those scenarios. We can't try and overteach, because they're not. You're just it's going to fall on deaf ears.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
Right, and that's a waste of your energy. Right, it's a waste of your energy. So it comes from love. So recognize that. Don't be compassionate to yourself. That inclination to give support comes from love, but ultimately it's a waste of energy. What will wake somebody up to this intercourse that's been happening in the relationship is the fact that this person is true and I'm not feeling true. And so that will put them into a receptive field of hearing anything you might want to offer if that relationship still exists. Yeah. And that's the simple path, right? It's like there are so many people I've offered books that'll solve all their problems. And I'm like, if you read this and really read it, your past 4 years of hell would be reconciled, and they still won't pick it up. Right. And it's like, but then they come back to me 2 years later and they're like, good for you. And they ask, like, they're like, ask me for a tip. And I'm like, it's really not for me. Like, it's not for me to tell you, right? It's all simple, but we've created everything that's in the way of us seeing clearly.
Yeah, I agree with that. And the key to this is what you just said earlier, we can read all the books we want, but are we actually integrating them into our lives? Are we making, if you believe what you're reading and you want to change and you want to improve, or you do want to embody what you've read because you believe in it, then it also has to be part of who you are. I believe that's what works for me, integrating it into my life, into my routine, maybe as much as for reading the Daily Stoic every day. For instance, I'm usually reading something to Young Pueblo almost every day, and those are even short little. I don't have one with me now today, but they're just opening up to a random page and reading the passage. So that's what helps me channel my inner wisdoms and beliefs, and opening myself up to a new perspective. So, we went from, I was like, well, there's Joe Dispenza. And interesting, my quantum girls that I talk to every Monday, we were talking about what books we're all reading, and we're reading one together right now, and so we talk about it each week.
Dispenza?
I think we're going to do Dispenza next, but we were doing oh gosh, no, it just escaped me who we were reading. I can look in a minute.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to see him.
Where? When?
In Barcelona.
That's amazing.
Yeah, in May.
Oh, that's so fun.
Yeah,
I've never been to Spain.
I did a brief. I planned a brief trip, so it'll be about a week. If any of our listeners are going, I'd love to meet up. But yeah, I'm doing so I'm staying in the Gothic Quarter. There's a lot of art there, but I'm also doing a couple tours because there's a lot of. I'm interested in the Knights Templar. And there's a lot of cathedrals there, so I want to go see a lot of that. First couple nights I'm doing hostels, but nice ones, just because it's a solo trip, so I want to meet people.
Right.
And then last 2 nights are at the convention center, so it's with Dispenza. It's his progressive retreat, so it's there are tiers. So before you do a week long, you have to do the progressive.
Okay.
But I don't want to digress.
No, I think that's awesome.
Yeah, it'll be good.
Go see him.
It'll be good.
No, he's so.
I just feel also meet some people who are super aligned with the things I want to do. So that's really the big reason. I've seen a lot of his work, and I have a pretty good grasp on what he's up to. And I've read chunks of some of his books. But ultimately, I think that's a good, going to things like that, open good doors in life.
And that's what I would call, like, those are expanders. When we do things for ourselves that will align with our beliefs and how we want to grow and change, those people will expand you and open doors. I'm super excited for you. And Dispenza is definitely a person to do that. And he's on YouTube, obviously, and he's on Instagram. So I just sort of was like, well, here's the thing, I'll send this person. When he asked me, I was like, I'll send you, these are the people. Mm-hmm. And I think that you should either read some of his samples or listen to some of the samples and figure out what works. But, one book in particular, I mean, maybe you would have one book to recommend. It also depends on, like, what do you want? Like, what is it you want to work on? So spirituality, perhaps, you can read, Dispenza is spiritual. Also Eckhart Tolle is spiritual, very spiritual. And there's like certain books where I would say, I feel like I had to be at a place in my mind in order to read certain books. So, I mean, and that's not for me to decide with this person, but it's just giving them some ideas.
It's a real thing, okay? Where when we talk about being in a place to receive any type of information, I can draw two analogies concurrently. One was we were talking about, in order to achieve wisdom, we need to develop virtue in tandem with that. Yep. It's real. Yeah. It's real. All the mystical experiences I've had, all the huge transformative epiphanies I've had, they've happened immediately following something that's clicked in my perspective that's allowed me to see more clearly, more lovingly, right? Like loving something new that was challenging for me to love at another time is a pretty simple way of looking at it. And
that's amazing.
I always say that it's almost as if after those moments, it's like downloading a Rosetta Stone where you're living in the same world and all your circumstances are the same, but now you're completely translating things in ways that you could not conceive were real prior to that transformative state. Mm-hmm. You're actually downloading like a new language model into your system, right? Yeah. And your operating system becomes much more elevated and its possibilities become much more unbounded. And when it comes to receiving a book, like sometimes people's virtue just isn't there to receive that information. There's something blocking them from wanting to create that expansion. That voice that's causing conflict is actually louder than that voice that's inside of them that's supposed to be steering the ship, right? So you can't force that. It's just kind of a law that I've noticed that you can't circumvent by any means other than doing the work for yourself inwardly. It's an interesting phenomenon. I've even verbatim tried to teach people very dense things, but it won't cross the field. They won't understand. It's like, when you read a book once and nothing lands, but you have to read it 1 million times. You have to grow your ability to understand and digest until it gets to a place where it can actually bring it in, right? And register.
Absolutely.
There was something else I wanted to say on that. Remind me what started that whole thing.
Well, I was saying, if someone has to be ready to, like, if you want to give them recommendations for books because they asked you, which is that's the most important thing. He is asking, what books are you reading? What do you think you would recommend for me? Then they've opened themselves up to your, whatever it is you want to share. Mm-hmm. We can't force that. We can just say, okay, this is what I'm reading. Oh, I was also saying, for instance, when my friend in Hong Kong, she's a beautiful soul, and I met her. She was a lawyer, changed jobs. It was like taking over her mind and body. She was like not in a good way. The untethered soul came across her, and so I was teaching her infant massage, and she had a baby. And I knew her again as a friend, and then I was teaching her as a friend to teach her massage. And we would talk for a while afterwards about everything. And then one day she handed me the untethered soul, and she's like, "You're ready for this." And because it came from her, and because of the connection we already had, and because of how I just believed in who she was, and she believed in me, and like I believed in her. She believed, right. It was like it was a symbiotic relationship. It was it came from love. It came from a good place. She literally looked at me. She wrote in it. She's like, "You're ready for this," and I was like 100% ready for it. And as I read it, I bought it, and I have an Audible, and I've given it to other people. That book, the person who asked me yesterday, not ready for that book yet. It's almost like as we were saying, there's a progression, like you to be somewhere in your journey, spiritually, scientifically, whatever it is ready for that kind of book, or the other books that you want to recommend. So you do have to, in a sense, be ready for, because it will fall on deaf ears. I can give it to this person and recommend it and say, I have it. You can borrow. Well, actually, I won't give them my copy because it was written in by my friend. But I'll just say this is a book I would recommend eventually down the road. But I could see somebody, he's not ready for it yet, but he will be. So read something else in order to get to that, into that stage. Again, it's not nowhere near a judgment. It's like, if you read this book now, it won't make as much sense until you grow from the experiences that you're going through now.
Right.
So that's what you were saying.
No, that totally rings a bell. I mean, the right bell. It's a big theme that we talk about, and maybe it could use a little bit more clarity, which is resonance, right? So like some things don't resonate with people. When we say that, it's like our vibration. When we talk about vibration, I know it's this like disgustingly spiritual circle term at this point, but it's really not. Like, it's just the way things interact, right? And yeah, I mean, there's the physics of the tuning fork, but there's just ultimately like, we are little receptors and transmitters equally, right? And they have to be attached to the same wavelength, right, in order for them to be conducted. And that same truth goes for information, for word, which literally travels through vibration, right? And in simple terms, like when we resonate with something that someone says, you realize that there's an utter match, right? And if you don't match a book, if you don't match a word of advice, it doesn't know how to receive. An example of this in a family setting, right? In a family setting over the weekend, we had a distant relative come in town, and through no fault of his own, but this is just an observation, had some things to let off his chest because he needed a safe place to do it, and his immediate surroundings was not conducive to that. He had to be the one who kept balance, right? So he came, and there was some venting going on. But then the next person who wanted to talk in the circle and be heard immediately started saying, okay, well, here are all the negative things that I know about. And then the next person said, well, here are all the negative things that I know about. And you realize the faces on everybody just start to lower, right? In order to get to the place to receive a certain type of information that's being transmitted. So everybody who is open to the conversation is following the resonance of the language that's coming out of the mouth, negativity. Yeah. So the whole conversation is surrounded by negativity. And then another thing that happened is later on in the conversation, someone was talking about some type of renovation or some type of breed of dog, right? But the entire conversation had to do with how expensive something is. Right. And then you watch the progression. So everyone, has something that has to do with money, and then it balances on deficit of money. It's a language, and it's a conversation, and it's the resonance everybody's in. And I'm watching it play out as if it's just this like hilarious dance and pendulum that you have to choose to detach from. But I couldn't help but just watch this thing take on a life of its own, right? The conversation takes on a life of its own, and we are just conductors that are able to either separate from them, or we are able to, I know this is a little bit of a tangent, but we're able to separate from them, or we're able to engage in them. And that's all to say that we truly are conductors, right? There is an energy. There's an energy in everything. And words are one expression of that form, right? It's one very real expression of that creates energetic reality. And if we are able to understand that, like, when we are one transmission and someone else is another version of that transmission, then it'll inform if we're going to be able to actually come into resonance in some form of conversation by the nature of what your transmissions are. But it'll also inform, like, where you're going to give and receive in that energy.
Resonance is massive, and it's such a great perspective to have. It's
virtue puts you in the resonance of wisdom. Is that other thing?
That's what you wanted to say or were going to say. And asking the question, well, does this resonate for you? Whether or not it does, it's okay. It's not. You're still putting in the effort. You're aware. You want to put the work in. It'll resonate when it resonates, when it makes sense, when you have your epiphanies, and your revelations about whatever it is you're wanting to understand further. Hence, recommending a book. And somebody will say, yeah, I know I need to heal. And you're like, great, you're aware, that's for you, go for it, like, what's your healing journey? And then they choose to not do anything about it.
The truth is, we can't fight for them, right?
Yeah.
And I think sometimes when we labor to uplift others, they get comfortable within that and know that there's going to be a day when something else external is going to come and try and save me. So it's actually confusing to somebody. Yeah. It's confusing. And if the whole world is going through this evolution of, like, absolute wisdom and enlightenment and love, and you're still back, you're going to be a little inspired to follow, right? To follow suit. So it's better sometimes for other people's advancement, right? Unsolicited, and I know that's not what you were doing, but, like, unsolicited offerings of goodness, this is something, a new epiphany for me, is in truth vanity. And in truth it is detrimental, right?
Absolutely.
And so...
Because it's coming from, as you said, it's coming from love, it's coming from a good place.
Right, but that's the trickery, right? That's the trickery. I mean, everything has an absolute balance.
Well, we want what's best for people. We want what's best. Not that we know what's best, but, like, whatever they're. It's like it's because there's something. What is the word my friend used yesterday when I talked to him about? It's not coming to me. But he's like, you see things almost in a way that's. Oh, he's like, he called me clairvoyant. And whether or not that's true, I just thought it was cute. And he was like, no, you have a clairvoyance about you where you can actually see, I don't know, into people more than they realize, maybe more than they want you to. But you have this ability to just, like, look into. I've not been called clairvoyant before, but that's not the right word. But he's done so much inner work himself, and not that age makes a difference, but has had it. Age doesn't in this instance because he's been through so much in his life, and he's chosen to say, I'm breaking those patterns, those paradigms. I want to basically have a rebirth, start over, on this journey of healing for him. And this is well before I even met him. But then the way I talk to him and the way, again, like, you'll meet him one day, the way we talk about things, he's just like, you see it for like it is, but you also see, like, in a different realm, a different level, when you talk about things, when I talk about things with him. So I guess it's because it's like, then there is a trickery where we see this, and it's not even like falling in love with potential. It's like, no, there is potential. Everyone has it. So it's coming from a place of goodness and love and empathy. But they have to do it when they want to, if they want to.
The philosophical rebirth, death and rebirth, is when you finally get to a place where you actually make the matrix shattering change, where you realize that everything is a reflection of what's going on inside your mind, instead of everything that's going on inside of your mind is being impacted by the outer world. And within that, right, that is this one conversation that's in a lot of the literature, if you read about it. But in truth, life is a constant cycle of death and rebirth, right? And so going back to this, looking at the archetypal human being, right? The different tarot cards of what a human being is, right? The different zodiac, right? The different things that we come against in our life that we are transmuting from one pole to the other, right? These are all qualities that live on a spectrum that we judge as good or bad, but they're really the separation that we take in our path. And when we realize that what we're doing is pretty much exchanging the negative pole for the positive pole, we realize that after every time we've done that, we've killed a former self, and we've, through the death of that former self, created the opening for something new to come in. And that is what we're doing as individuals, and we're able to share that with a grander world. And so, again, we can't get there in the macrocosm unless everyone does it for themselves. And that's why we might feel compelled to boost other people up. But sometimes when we're too affectionate with our kids, they never learn to advance for themselves. And so it's an important reminder that we're all smart, we're all very capable, and ultimately everything we're doing is out of love, whether it's productive or detrimental. But I think the important message that underlies beneath all of this is that it's not like we are given these faculties that we were talking about as an invitation to experience what the evolution looks like, right? And I think that is obvious for humanity, right? That is obvious for humanity. And so the really engaging conversation in like personal development and like spiritual communities is like, we have all these things going on. We have all this bullshit going on in the world. And then there's this shift going on, right? And it's like, well, let's conceive of a world where that looks worth it. Let's conceive of a world where that provides us with a level of reason, with a level of conviction, with a level of dedication to truth, with a level of discernment in the things that we come across in our life, so that we know exactly which side of the pole we want to operate on. And I think if we can become clear, become incredibly clear over time about what that journey looks like and how to help people make those decisions from one side or the other, that would make way for a good blueprint for anyone to do that like individual journey, instead of it being like this mysterious thing that you're born into with all these questions.
The hard and the easy, or the good and the bad. There's beauty in everything. If you have that perspective, that mindset, and it's so true. The vibrational energy. If you are just sovereign in that process of knowing who you are, and you just show up that way, as that. Well, we're human, and but our spirit and our energy, it just exemplifies in such a natural way that people are drawn to that. That energy, so no matter how you explain it or talk about it, or you are it, people are drawn to that, and they're curious generally. So just go for it, man. Just talk about it. Just be that. And then over time, when people are ready, they'll be more curious, or you will truly attract those type of people that you want to. I know I used the word emulate earlier, but that you are aligned, you are in resonance, that wavelength is so similar. I would love to hear more about, it sounds like we had similar experiences the last week or so.
What makes you say that?
maybe not experiences, but we were feeling something similar. Because when you met me outside, it was like, sounds like you had, not that I like to say it was a week, but it was like it's whatever was going on in the last, this time frame.
No, I had the flu.
Oh, okay.
I had slept for 72 hours. I don't know where it came from. I'm usually a very healthy man, but I have speculations of how it came to be, and I think regardless, even in the most uncomfortable and difficult situations, I'm like, I really need to make sure that I use this time to practice what I preach on every front. So I became a student of my flu, right? I'm not kidding, and this can sound silly, but I'm pretty dead serious when I say that I allowed it to be my teacher. And so the initial things that were uncomfortable for me, that gave me discomfort, was allowing myself to recover, right? Because a part of me could have easily forced myself to work and to exercise and to do all these things that I love to do. But I had to just let myself be. Like, I didn't even read. That's how you know.
Yeah.
I just laid in bed and slept and came up for soup when the medicine kicked in, right? And I took medicine, that's how you know.
You took medicine.
Yeah, but I allowed it to be my teacher. So that was the initial discomfort, is just allowing myself to recover. And then while I did that, I began having these very introspective moments where I would really analyze, like I do like a nightly reflection, starting from the end of my day, going in reverse through my day to recall things, but also to kind of pay attention to who was in control in my mind throughout the day, and what I might have done poorly, and what I could do better, or what I've done well, or what I could have done even better, right? That's kind of what I do every night. And this one, since it was so dramatic, it was such a dramatic shock to my system, was a big macrocosm, paying attention to my whole life, right? And which voices were loud throughout each of them. Which ones existed in a certain stage of my life, which ones existed in others, right? Every 7 years, our entire body regenerates. Every cell in our body is brand new.
Every
right?
7 years?
Roughly, right? And so, I was able to really pay attention into like what those waves look like. And also, more immediately, the tracks I've been on, right? Because I've been working really hard. And I've been, I've realized that I've made room for extremity, like extremeness. And a part of me loves that, but I'm not sure which part loves that. And so I think moderation would probably be more important, because I might have just simply overworked my system, right? It could have been that simple, right? I might have just simply overworked my system to a point where it was like, you're gonna crash now, but we're gonna allow you to bounce back into a better place. And so I think moderation is important. Like, I don't need necessarily to torture myself in the gym, right? I don't need necessarily to compensate by eating all this food in order to accommodate a workout, right? Like, that takes energy out, even though I love it. Yeah. Like, it makes me feel good. There's probably a version of that that's a little bit more moderate, right? And so the same goes for work. The same goes for the things I'm doing. The same goes for the amount I extend myself in relationships I have. It's like, a circle is still a circle no matter what size it is, right? And so I think for me, I can allow myself to grow a little bit more naturally instead of rushing everything and missing.
Yeah. No, I love that for you. I love that your body was like, you need to rest. And actually that gave you such space to be with yourself and to take a fucking breath. And you still had amazing revelations that you're sharing now, which I appreciate and love hearing. That you were like, wait a second, I think that's life-changing.
It is like an outer reflection of something that I've been doing that was imbalanced. Yeah. Right? It was too much. It was pushed too much. And so I'm able to just simply reflect on like what a balance could look like, where this body never gets sick, Because on the outer world, like, I mean, if I was to actually try and analyze how I got sick or why I got sick, I would have no clue. I do all the health and wellness modalities. I think very pure thoughts. Like, my mind is pretty clear. Right. My everything I do, I don't even get tempted by like processed food or sweets or any of that. Like, I don't. And so I would be baffled to try and figure out why I got sick. But it's clear that something's going on inside of me that is vulnerable. And so maybe it's not these things, maybe it's over relying on these things, right? This like routine, this pattern, like all these things. And sometimes it takes allowing yourself to just die, right? Allowing those things that seem to have been uplifting to die, because you're not living for the ritual, you're using the rituals to remember who you are and what this is. And so I don't necessarily have to pinpoint exactly what it was that brought me there. All I'm saying is that I truly am grateful for it just humbling me a little bit, because I needed that. I needed to be humbled, and I needed to take a deep breath. Even more so, right? Even more so. You always can. And so it came at potentially an important time. I think it came at the right time. There's never a good time to take a week off of your life. But every time you're supposed to, and you do, it is the best week you could have.
You mean you didn't put it in your calendar that you were going to get sick last week? They didn't schedule that in?
No, but I did block my calendar.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No, I think that's vital. I want to ask you about something you said earlier, and I would ask you this anyway, whether we're recording or not, about the times that you reflect. It seems to be at night, or on things of what you want to improve on in yourself, or change, or what became aware. I think that's awesome that you do that, and it's so essential for all of us to do that, taking that time to reflect on how you showed up in the world today, yesterday, or how you showed up in a moment, and you think to yourself, yeah, that's exactly how I wanted to show up, or that's not exactly how I wanted to show up, so what do I want to change about that? I don't know if you had anything specific that you wanted to share, or just maybe it was an overall sentiment that you had that you were just sharing. But if you had, you're very good at examples in your stories, so if you had anything specific.
Well, it's every morning and every night. I think stories are the best, but I don't necessarily have stories because this is just such a personal thing. Yeah. But it's just always, kind of minor tweaks, and it's not a rigorous endeavor. It's actually like, it's my time with myself, right? It's my time to just be with myself. And it's not necessarily like I guess it's a little bit meditative, but it's an active kind of meditation where I'm genuinely reflecting backwards. I do it backwards because I was studying some of Rudolf Steiner's work, and there's a specific reason for it. But for me, the practice of self-analysis is so important, because if we're talking about having like some level of like a Soren Kierkegaard quote, life is experienced moving forward, understood moving backwards, right? Like, if we want to make sure that we are on the right path and we are actually growing and we are not causing any type of detriment to others through that growth, then it's important to do that. It doesn't feel like work to me. It doesn't feel like anything, because it helps me make sure that I'm aligned. It would be selfish for me to go out into the world. Personally, like, I'm not calling other people selfish, but it would seem to me like the way I would show up is a little bit selfish if I didn't have a level of grounding and intention behind the way I go out and conduct myself. Because it is vulnerable. Like, everything that I think will turn into something I say, which will turn into something I do. Right? And so I try and, when no one's around, I make sure my thoughts are pure. When no one's around, I make sure the stuff I do is still good. It doesn't look any different than when people are around me. And that became the work to do, right? It's like the virtue, if I compartmentalize part of my day to like going and someone was talking about how someone in their family got sick and they found out that he had an OnlyFans, right? Like, so all this whole world that he hid came out, right? The thing is, like, if I show up in the world as a pure person, as a good person, and then I go and hide, and I have this like second life that exists, who I really am is actually just in between both of those. And it's living in constant conflict between the two, right? I would actually potentially prefer to just be a dark person, because then at least I'm not in conflict all the time, right? And so my point here is like, when we kid ourselves, right? Like when we go out in the world and there's this hidden like second side of us that has work to do, but we put on a face, right? Then what we're actually training is a muscle that turns off our intuition, because you know that you're lying, you're living a lie. And if you continue to live a lie, then your intuition is not going to talk to you, because it only speaks the truth. And so what I've come to realize is that, like, truly by developing virtue, you are actually blossoming these really beautiful flowers that are way more profound than anything of the senses, than anything material that you can obtain in the world. And so the more I've been doing this, the more I'm realizing, like, all the things I want to do are still super big on the macrocosm, right? I'm so invigorated by the possibilities for this world. But at the same time, like, the specifics of the vision that I have for the world have completely transformed away from like being substantive to being things of substance, right? So it's like not the thing that drives it, but the thing, but the value that can be brought, right? And so for me, I am equally concerned. You know, I think there are three things that I really focus on, right? And the mind being the starting point of the three. The mind is where I begin everything, because it connects the other two, which is my outer world and my kind of personal spiritual world. It is the gateway between both. And what the morning, and I know this is a long tangent, but I want to make sure the mind can be clear so that the other two can meet, essentially.
And so for you to clear the mind, what's that for you?
Well, if I didn't do the review, right? If I didn't do the review or the preparation for the day, then I will have backup.
Yeah.
And so it'll seem, and over time I'll have so much backup of things that I'll dwell on or be anxious about, that I won't be able to think clearly, because there's so much clutter. And a lot of us are living with so much clutter that we don't even understand that there's a world where none of that exists. So we think we live in tight quarters, when in reality we live in unbounded quarters. And so it's a slow matriculation from the first practice, where you start to realize that, like, oh, there's vacant space in here, right? Like there's vacant space here. We don't have to, live shoulder to shoulder with all these thoughts that we have. And so it's only a service to you to just reflect on what's coming to the surface, because these are the things that are going to point you to things that you need to let go of, things that exist in the mind but then also translate to different parts of our body that can turn into illness and can impact others in a negative way. It's like when you start to recognize the interconnectedness of all of it, all you want to do is make sure that you are being pure. And I'm not trying to virtue signal whatsoever. My point is, like, the reason I do it every day is because I know that I am a victim, or not a victim, but I know that I can fall victim to being a motherfucker, right? And so I don't want to be that.
That's right.
And so, yeah, it's like the Hulk, right? I do it for your protection. I'm not here to bow at you. I'm saying, like, I just don't want to be a dick anymore.
Yeah.
Right? And so, and I never really was. I've always been a good boy.
Yeah.
But I've done things that have hurt people.
Yeah.
And I don't want to do that again.
Yeah.
I don't.
No, that's amazing. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
And again, like the self-awareness is massive there for you. And I followed you, that I was tracking you the whole time. It makes so much sense. And it just reiterates that I do practice that for the most part. I do that. I definitely do that in the morning. Like the reflections come super strong for me in the morning. And I know that you do that at night too for yourself, and it makes me, I think when you do those reflections at night as well, you put yourself in a good sleeping resonance as well. It's like, okay, I made peace with those things that I want to work on or work towards, and also giving yourself that, like, oh, I showed up really well today, and these things, and this is what's going to help me grow and expand and share with the world and be a better version of myself. And however, like, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it's a good reminder for me to. I have my book next to me, my journal's next to me at night. But yeah, making space and time for that, or creating that for myself at night as well, I think would be really helpful. And self-analysis constantly. I know that I'm doing that anyway, so why not for me? I know for me, writing it down is really helpful.
Mm-hmm.
I need to actually buy some more journals. I'm at the end here of these two.
When we have these, like, intimate moments,
Mm-hmm.
I prefer not to go the scientific route of explaining this, but before bed and early morning, it's essentially the gateway between when you are conscious and unconscious, right?
That's right. Yeah.
It's your subconscious.
Mm-hmm.
And these are times when we can program our thoughts. And again, I'm not taking the scientific route. I'm actually just going to take the preferred route here, which is just talking, which is...
But it's so true. It's so true.
So these are actually pretty crucial moments for the day.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, I've started to realize that beyond writing, verbally saying things in these times are truly like spells. You can take even Andrew Huberman, he talks about prayer. He talks about prayer, right? And so it's like, how can someone who's so connected to biology and the mind land in a place where he starts to recognize the balance of prayer? And I would speculate it's because all of nature is an outer crystallization of spiritual reality, right? These are things that come through a process because of patterns that exist in a pure form in the spirit, right? And so if he's so surrounded by these patterns all the time, of course he's going to say there's some type of design. And so he turned to prayer, but I'm reading this book that's essentially, I finished it just finally. It's like this, essentially an encyclopedia of, like, esoteric wisdom and all these different teachings. But in the Kabbalah specifically, the teachers were talking about a very explicit pattern, right? Everyone says in the beginning there was the word, right? In some books, but in other books they were talking about these three characters. One's a shin, which represents the maternal. We talked about this at dinner. Remember that?
Yes.
There's a shin, which is it looks like a W with flames at the tops of the corners, and then there's a mem, which kind of resembles a drop of water, and mayim in Hebrew is water, and then there's an aleph, which kind of resembles like waves of air going into an intersection direction, and they were reading it backwards so trying to interpret the words backwards. But in reality, it's read from right to left, so it's Shema, right? And there's actually a prayer in Hebrew, which is Shema, right? And it says, Shema Yisrael Adonai Echad, which means hear, like listen, hear, O Israel, our God is one. And so it's saying here, like, listen. And the land of Israel is just humanity. It's like the material world, right? Adonai is like the God that we envision. It's the sun and a lot of other metaphors, is one. Like, we're all one, right? And so in really looking, because I never really knew the esoteric meanings of those letters, which are all maternal. Shin is fire, Mem is water, and then Aleph is air. Shema, which means we go from fire to water to air, right? The elements. Right. And if you analyze that, you have this fire, which is this image, the thought, right, that exists within inside of you. And then through that, you translate it through water, through the mouth, through the tongue, and that comes out into air. It's like almost as if all these different ancient scriptures are saying that you speak everything into existence. So not only is our mind on this train, on this track that goes and later influences what we say and what we do, but they're saying that since we are all waves, right? We are all electricity. We're all vibrations that influence these 0.00000001 particulate matter that follows that. That what's really happening is we can be co-creators with the existence that we live in if we harness control over the things we talk about and say. And so that's why I think it's important to be impeccable with your speech, but also like in those moments that are sacred when you are truly there with yourself, able to analyze what's going on and able to see clearly and know what you want. Those are good times not only to write things down, but to like speak into existence what's going to happen. And if you know the truth in the power of that, then you won't worry if that's the world that's to come.
High power. My issue isn't televising. You ain't gotta tell the wise how to stay on beat, because our life's an instrumental. This is physical and mental. I won't sugarcoat it. You'll die from diabetes if these other niggas wrote it. And everything on TV just a figment of imagination. I don't want a plastic nation. Dread that like a Haitian. While you motherfuckers waiting, I be off the slave ship, building pyramids, writing my own hieroglyphs. Just call it shit high power. Nigga, nothing less than high power.